Shalom and welcome to the Remnant Radio Show, where we're living and learning a restoration lifestyle. This is Nitza Moshe from Remnant Remedy. And today we're going to show you a teaching that I did a couple of years ago titled El Shaddai, which means the many-breasted one. And it's nursing and contractions. So it's El Shaddai, nursing and contractions for the many-breasted one. And it's a parallel teaching on the birthing into the kingdom, the future greater exodus, as far as birthing that in that physical relocation of God's people returning from all four corners of the earth. But it's really lessons in contractions from natural childbirth and breastfeeding using real milk, nursing milk from a mother. That's so nutritional, builds up the immune system. We could just do a whole show just on those facts alone. But it's just a parallel teaching. And there were things that there were things that Father Yahweh Elohim revealed to me during my years when I was younger. And I was nursing and birthing and having home births and raising children when he spoke to me about raising a remnant. And so I just wanted to share with you before we go into the teaching something that hopefully the green screen will show behind me a picture. And it's a picture of a locked cabinet in a supermarket, a grocery store right near here. And, of course, I nursed my children, and I'm not saying I never used formula, but it was something I might have used as they got older if we were traveling, but rarely. It was really probably more for our adopted child, even though we raised him on goat's milk, and I had a goat and I milked the goat. But sometimes when we're traveling, we might pick up formula. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I realized through some family circumstances, friends and people that we were taking care of, and my daughter was taking care of actually. My daughter was taking care of my oldest son, adopted son's son, during a time when the baby's parents were not capable of taking care of him. And we learned during that time that it was very hard to keep or give formula back to the parents because people bought and sold formula on the black market to basically for drugs. And so that was really sad and shocking for me. And it'd been a couple of years, and it's been quite a while since I actually bought formula. So I was checking out the grocery store one day, and I realized when I looked up as I walked out the door that there's this huge locked cabinet, and it had baby formula in it. It also had, medication for yeast infection and birth control and EPT pregnancy tests in that same cabinet. But the thing that amazed me was, oh my gosh, they're locking up formula. And all I could think about was, isn't that a sign, a physical sign of what's happening spiritually? If formula, which is artificial formula, is so valued and worth so much, and of course it nourishes a child, so it is worth a lot, even if it isn't, the best that a child could get, the pure milk. But if it's worth so much that they have to lock it up, that's a telltale sign of the times we live in. Number one, that there's so much, and mothers aren't nursing their children naturally, and we've lost that art to the point that we have to lock it up because people, pretty much steal it. And so I took my groceries out, I came back in, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just can't believe this. I have to ask the cashier about it. So I went up to the cashier, I said, what's the deal with the formula? Is it locked up because, it's so expensive now, and, it gets stolen? And she said, well, actually, that is one of the reasons. She says, but the original reason was that we were told that they used formula, baby formula, to make meth. I was like shocked, okay? So, but she said, we have learned since that it's not used to make meth, but we still keep it locked up because people steal it. Well, that caused me to go and do some research. And what I found was they didn't necessarily use it to make meth, but what they did is they used it to cut meth. In other words, to dilute it. So if you put baby formula in the meth, then you could sell more for less and, basically greed and profit on the black market. So I just wanted to say let's just think about that. Something that's supposed to be natural and nourishing has been, has become artificial and is put on the black market, and used to steal, buy, trade, to feed drugs and things to a person who, for whatever reason they started, they lacked the knowledge and the capability of knowing that there's a God in heaven and a God on earth who his spirit reigns everywhere that loves him or her. And I just want to say, we're in an epidemic all over the world, and especially in this country, because we have so many luxuries that we don't even realize it. We think we're poor, but we're rich in material, indulgent things, and yet we're so poor in spirit. And so I hope that you enjoy this teaching, and I hope that you can see and understand. Please understand, I don't want to be condemning to those who do not have natural childbirth, to those who do not nurse their children. However, I will say that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that those should be exceptions and not the primary way to give birth or to nourish our children. And it's a real implication of what's going on in the spirit realm, of what we do in the natural realm when we don't naturally birth our children and we don't naturally nurse them. There's a lot of character qualities that are lost, not to mention our health physically, spiritually, and mentally suffers from this. And I just hope that you see what I try to apply in this parallel teaching to the birthing of the kingdom, and the kind of people that you want to pull on, and people that you want to raise up as far as children go, people who know what it's like to birth naturally, to go through the pain, to endure and trust in Elohim, and to nourish naturally, because it does make a difference in what we think and what we do and how we act and how we persevere through life and life's trials. So I hope you enjoy it. Before I really get into the teaching, there's a few things I want to say. And first of all, I want to say this is the first time I've been here at this congregation and almost every presentation I've ever got to do with my husband. And he's my better half. And about a year and a half ago, he said, "Why don't we move to Oregon?" And I said, "No. I love y'all, but I didn't want to move again." So one of the things, the reason I got this, I went to this place in Salem called the Fussy Duck. I don't know if you've been there. I couldn't figure out what it was, right? So it's like a vendor mall, but you don't really know it. It's just one big store. And so it was amazing to me because I really didn't have time to put this message together like I should have. And but the good thing about it, when I was praying about which message to do, like he was saying earlier, most everything I'm going to be sharing today is something that Father has imparted in my life through tribulations. So it's something I own and something I don't have to worry about going out and getting when the time comes because it's already there. But anyway, so it was amazing to me. It is hot off the press. I just finished the PowerPoint this morning. Didn't proof it. But I was walking through the store yesterday at the Fussy Duck, and I took these cool pictures of these cool signs. So I am advertising for them. You can go buy the sign there. And it reminded me of us being here. One of the things that had to happen was, the finances had to be there just to move, not just to get a job. So one of the things I just wanted to say is, you know, wherever Yahweh guides, he always provides. And that's one of the ways we know that, you know, it's truly what he wants. And sometimes we know for sure beyond the shadow of a doubt, we're just waiting for it to come. And other times we're just like, are we on the right track? You know, are we hearing the right thing? And so the reason I saw that, and I was like, you know, if it doesn't open, it's not your door. And obviously it was our door because from December till March, Father doubled Remnant Remedy and made it possible for us to be here. So I just want to praise him. And a year ago, we were looking at closing. So it was really amazing. So anyway, if the door doesn't open, you know, okay, now I'm going to talk about doors a lot for a little bit. And is this not turning? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to. Okay, so I also saw this sign. I love my tribe. And right now, y'all are my tribe. So, and a lot of these, next one. The next thing is another one. While we try to teach our children all about life, our children teach us what it is all about. And most of these, next slide, are because of my children. Is it possible to move up here a little? Can I push? Let me see. Okay, the names in these stories have not been changed to protect the innocent. I'm sorry. Apologies to my children. However, Yahweh has used them much in my life to teach me. This message is not non-GMO. I'm sorry, it is non-GMO. It's not genetically modified. You know, I had a struggle about what to call it because I had so many issues to deal with. But in the shower yesterday, Father gave me the title, you know, El Shaddai, the many-breasted one, contractions and birth pains. And so I'm just warning you up front. I do not mean to step on your toes. This will not be a comfortable message for many of you. I hope that you know me enough to realize I'm not trying to condemn anyone. But I'm going to talk about some things that a lot of Americans have no clue about, and a lot of believers. And the reason is because we have been removed from the reality of real living. A lot of that's because we're removed from an agricultural lifestyle. And so if some of these things pain you, I'm sorry. But that's not what my point is, to pain you. I want you to think of a mountain. At the top of the mountain is the spring of the water. And the water's most clear at the very top. It's pure. The more you go downstream, the more muddied it is. And for many of us, most of us, if you're anything like me, when you came in, you were full of mud and dirt. And hey, some water with mud is good. It's better than no water. Okay? So the fact that you have been called, the fact that he has drawn you out and began to reveal things to you so that you can walk your way up to the top of that mountain is what you should all be celebrating when I speak of these things. Because what I want to do is I want to take you to what I believe Father wants us to be in many aspects in our life and reality, and that's at the top of the mountain. And, you know, all throughout Scripture we see, and even in the Kedoshim Torah portion, and I think it basically says the earth or the land or the Eretz spewed you out. He spewed us out, the land did, because of our sins. So we got to get the reality before we start condemning ourselves, is that we're here because of that. We are captives, we are sinners, we are slaves, we are not set free. We are set free internally in our spirit and our relationships, and Father can set us free in many areas, but the reality is we are not under the rule and reign all over the face of the earth by a kingdom that rules tangibly, that sets his people free. That is something we're waiting for. So please keep that in mind. And so before we start beating people up, we always got to remember we have come out of bondage personally and in these different areas. So that's something I really want you to keep in mind. Next, please. So in the beginning, we're going to talk about nursing. I'm going to try to keep this as clean as I can, but you know, it's pretty much in scripture, and hopefully it'll be an exciting topic. You won't go to sleep. So if you've never nursed naturally or never had a natural birth or raised farm animals, you're going to miss in the depths of your being the reality of a lot of scriptures and life principles. And one of the reasons it's so important is you're going to be going through trials and tribulations, and there's going to be an exodus. You know, even if it's just running and being a refugee from some country. Because when you're in these true birth pains, any woman who has given natural birth, except for a few rare exceptions that I know they're going to die. There's no doubt about it. Okay? And even when the midwife comes along or your husband comes along and says, "It's okay, honey, you're doing good," you're going, "You're a liar." Okay? You are lying to me. I know I'm dying. Okay? So it's important because you want to surround yourself with people who have dealt with real trials, real contractions, real nursing, and the real deal in life. Because they're going to be able to come up beside you and say, "You're not going to die. I know you feel like you're going to die, okay? But you're not. You're going to live. You're going to make it through it. And it's going to be glory and victory, okay? Because as soon as that baby's born, when are we going to do this again? I could have a few more. I'm just saying, maybe not for a day or two. But the oxytocin and all the hormones, all the things that happen as a result of that natural birth is what makes you long or even ever want another one. And that oxytocin, when you're nursing, helps you not kill the one you've got. Okay, so they're important, because if you bypass all of that with drugs and medications and other methods, you're missing out. And worse than that, you're going to have short-term and long-term effects that aren't going to be. So if you're offended by this message, maybe you need it. El Shaddai, Nursing and Contractions of the Many-Breasted One. The God with Breasts. I found this on the internet. It's a book, a very old book. It's a scholar book from like the 1900s, maybe. And the other thing I wanted to title maybe was a reality check with the natural versus the unnatural living. Hopefully the next slide will come through. It did, thank you. El Shaddai. I like to look at the ancient Hebrew. So we have a Shin, a Dalet. And, you know, when I usually look at Shin, I think of being pressed. It can also mean two, or white teeth, or white. And in this case, most of what I've read showed that it was two. And then the Dalet and the Dalet. And we've talked about, whenever you hear me talk about the living word, Debar, we've got the Dalet, the Bet, the Resh, and we can literally translate it into, in the beginning, when vibrations and frequencies or energy were put in order. And the way you do that is one of the ways, if you got to look at that little, looks like an upside down top hat, but it's a door to a tent. It's a flap. So when you lift that flap, it swings, okay? That's the concept. So let's go to the next one. We'll get to that. Well, we have the many-breasted one, which really the connotation is that Elohim has more than enough for provision. He has more than enough. And if you've been removed from a farm and removed from nursing, then you don't get that's that nourishing thing, literally. And just in case you think I'm lying, I copied and pasted this from the sword. And basically, going back to the ancient Hebrew, because I think it's more descriptive, and it goes more around the verb or action of the word. The shad is a breast. It's a pictograph, and it's a picture of two front teeth, and the Dalet is a picture of the tent door that dangles down. So together, they mean two that dangle. Okay? And what's interesting, another word related to this was harem. So I guess if you have a harem, you have a few more doors than other people. Now, there's an opposite to this word, though, because we know there's a contronym to most things, which is how he created all things. I believe, in Jeremiah, when he said he made a covenant with night and day, it also represents the opposing forces of energy that he's created through all the earth. So a lot of the verses that have that root word or that word in it are actually not good. We're looking at breasts that are dried up and shriveled. And when we think about breast milk, I don't know if it's scientifically true. I've got to figure that out. I couldn't find it easily. But years ago, when I was studying, I thought that I found some research that basically someone said, and they might have been simplifying or oversimplifying, but that basically when you're nursing a child, you are giving them a blood transfusion. That it's predominantly, I thought they said white corpuscles. So if I'm wrong, please forgive me. But in either case, the thing I thought amazing about that is that the life is in the blood. Okay? And, if you want to have healthy milk, you have to have healthy blood, you have to have good nourishment, etc. So the other concept is you have a life force that's flowing through the body. Now, in all of this, I want you to keep, when I'm talking, I want you to keep thinking about how do I apply this to my relationship with Elohim? Because he is the many-breasted one. He's the one who nurses and nourishes his children. And another meaning for it is to slope, which is the slope of the dangling doors. Okay. And this was a quote, semi-quote, that I pulled from that scholar book. They said that, in Scripture, it's usually translated Almighty instead of El Shaddai. And so in this book that was titled, basically said, does our God, or is he a God with breasts? And so with the exception of Yahweh, no divine name has generated so much controversy as El Shaddai or Shaddai. Greek and Latin translators of the Bible agreed that Shaddai must be understood to mean omnipotent, or that's where we get almighty, while the rabbis, Midrashi, help me with that word, exegesis, something, I'm not pronouncing that right. Yes, something like that, suggested self-sufficiency. On that basis, the King James translation rendered the name as El Shaddai, Almighty God. Some scholars believe that El Shaddai is extremely ancient and maybe one of the authentic pre-Canaanite epithets for the God of the fathers. No duh. Anyway. I must have skipped one here. I skipped a couple. So it was interesting. Maybe Dave can help out a little here, but I found that word was in the scriptures 48 times. And I was thinking of, there's some other relations there with the government, with the 10, but the 4 being around, relating to the earth, and 4, restoration. And when you see it, 6, there's at least 6 times in Genesis, 1 time in Exodus, but when you get in the book of Job, it's all over the place, and you go on, and then it starts getting into, it's not a good thing. So, as usual, your response to trials and tribulations, or whatever is happening that Father is doing, really has to do with your position in his kingdom and his family. Okay? Otherwise, it's not a good thing. He's going to shrivel up that milk. Okay? He's going to shrivel up that teat from that animal, or whoever has the young. And so it becomes a bad thing for people. There were 48 towns for the Levites in the Israelite territories. And I found this interesting. The word queen is in the scripture 48 times. And she has doors. Just saying. The number 48 is used in the Bible, and the number 48 is used in the Bible 2 times. Okay, next. So we'll see where we're going to go. I don't know how. I'm told that I have only 70 minutes because you can't reproduce it and send it out on the CD. It won't fit. So I will just curtail it when I have to. So I've got lessons from nursing all my children. But the one in particular that I probably be sure to share is the one about Zachariah. And the first one was my first child. I had nobody around me to show me how to nurse. I had a pediatrician who said his wife did it with 6 children. It was a piece of cake. Now, my daughter, Crystal, happens to be one of those ones who took right to it, and she nursed her children like a piece of cake. For me, outside of birth, it was probably the hardest thing I did for the first 14 days. So I tell young mothers, because there are no young mothers around or older mothers to show you how to express, how to do these things, how to overcompensate problems, what to do with the child who maybe might be born early. You got to literally pinch their feet and make them cry to wake them up because they don't want to eat but one nibble every 10 minutes and keep you awake 24 hours. So you need someone around who can tell you how to do this, okay? And this is the same thing with things in your life. And the other thing I learned was there are people out there, and a lot of them are your brothers and sisters, because they've been drinking the muddied water. They never drank that pure water from the top, who are going to sabotage you in your nursing. They're going to hate you and disdain you for that. Okay? In my case, you can understand my mother and my mother-in-law at the time were brought up in the generation where they were convinced that they really couldn't have natural births and they needed to give us carnation milk and bottles. So when they had a child or a daughter-in-law who grew up and said, no, this isn't healthy for me or my child, they hated it. And they made sure they fed my child whenever I left the house, right before I came home, and they even fed her cereal. Now, coming from being a career woman and being trained all my life, even though I wanted to be a wife and mother, that in the public school system, you don't need a man. Okay? You can choose to be with one, but you don't need one. How do you think that affected my relationships? Now, it's scary in these days when there are no real men. Okay? But I'm going to tell you, if you're in a situation like that and you submit to Yahweh, He'll take care of you. And I know that you might think, well, He's not loving me, He's not doing this, He's not doing that, but I'm telling you, He knows what you don't have. He knows what you need. Okay? And He's not withholding it and not bringing down the lightning on Him because He doesn't love you. He's doing it because if you will allow Him to, He will use it as an opportunity for the evilest of spouses to be the vessel that drives you to His bosom. So I learned that they're going to sabotage you. I didn't learn that just once. Let's get down to Tommy, my first grandson. My niece, she wanted to nurse. She tried for one day. She decided she couldn't do it. It was too hard. The doctors told her she couldn't do it. My daughter, on the other hand, had a baby around the same time as a piece of cake. I was very sick, didn't even know I was going to live, and we had a miraculous thing happen where people had to come in, and within 2 weeks, we went from being packed and ready to go with 11 people and 2 26-foot U-Hauls and a couple of vans from Florida to Montana to meet a call and a vision that Father had given us. But in that process, my sister-in-law and now understand, these are Pentecostals, Christian believers, brother, sister-in-law, and daughter and niece, called social services on my daughter. They came up to take my children and my grandchild. And I don't have time to go in that, but it was a miracle. It's a miracle that what happened that day. And we had to face the lion roaring in our faces. And it was all jealousy. I had released the vision to them about what God was doing in our lives. And they were jealous because they came over to help move. And Tommy was one of those babies that if you weren't holding him, he cried. And Crystal was like me. You don't give your baby anything but breast milk, especially when they're that little. He was only about 4 to 8 weeks old. And that made her mad because she couldn't nurse her child. Okay? And anybody, you need to do your research. Nursing babies are not fat generally, especially in the beginning. They can catch up, as we know. Jed was a preemie, very thin, but after 3 months of his brain waking up, he became probably one of the fattest babies I've ever seen. Okay, so it's possible, but in the beginning, that's not the case. So the world's charts, medical charts, are all based on formula-fed babies. You know, it's kind of like fattening up the cow. You give them those grains, right? Well, that's what they're doing to the babies. And then they judge all other children by that. So, anyway, we had to overcome that. So if you've got real milk going on in your life between you and the Lord, there are people who are going to want to take it from you. Okay? Amy, okay, I was about 8 months, she was about 8 months old. I got pregnant, and pregnancy for me, all my babies to me are miracles. I was 10 years barren, lost a baby, had a baby, 4 years later, got pregnant, had Amy, 8 months later, got pregnant, lost it. Another 10 years, barrenness. Then in my old age, I got it right and had those last two. Greg is adopted. But what happened with that is I was beginning to miscarriage. I already learned that, and this is going to be extreme for a lot of you, I know, okay? I'd already learned some things that Father had showed me. You got to remember, I'm an Air Force brat. I believe everything I've been told. I'm teacher's pet. I have no friends. I'm an outcast, always have been. Probably until the last couple of years, I finally have some peeps. Okay. At least you pretend well. And so anyway, long story short, the doctor who had never even examined me, woman doctor, I personally don't like women in power. Thank you, honey. Because a lot of them just think they have to outdo everything, and they think they're God. Not that men don't. But what happened was, I was spotting, and so she told me I had to immediately quit nursing. And I'm like, well, you better give me a good reason, because this ain't making sense to me. And I figured, I know I was simple, but I figured, I've seen other women do it. If God created us, and I am nursing, and I get pregnant, then surely he made it possible for us to nurse one child and carry another. I don't think God messed up, okay? So I challenged her. I didn't know I was challenging her. I just like, you got to give me a reason, because this isn't just nutritional. If you've never nursed your child, it's not just about nutrition and being immune and giving them their immune system. We're talking about this relationship, this love, this separation. Not to mention your breasts are going to be engorged. It's going to be painful, but we got drugs for that. Okay, so long story short, I went and did some research with the La Leche League, and the doctors came back and said, no, actually it's the opposite. If you nurse, you're more apt to be able to keep your child. Long story short, out of that one, the woman almost killed me. She did a DNC against my will in the office, didn't know what she was doing, gave me a drug that almost killed me. And I can't believe I'm here today. It was a horrific story that happened. But my point there is, if you're nursing, okay, which I'm going to get to the story that Father showed me with Zach, you'll get it. It'll all come together for you. Jed, on the other hand, I slipped and fell. I was 8 months pregnant, felt like, didn't even feel pregnant. I was 43. I was a vegan. I was really healthy. I had to get healthy because after I had Zach, I couldn't hold him. I was so unhealthy. But Jed came along. I slipped and fell, and he was born early. And the only thing wrong with him is all his little brain cells were not connecting. Now understand that most people, in fact, I just found out this week, most people are on drugs and medications. So their brains aren't working properly. In fact, when they're born and they're babies, they don't work properly because they don't have the pure nutrition that they need.
Then we've got, medications, vaccinations, all kinds of things going on. We got GMOs, all this stuff. So people aren't thinking right. And a lot of the drugs, the psychotropic drugs, actually destroy that part of your brain that gives you the ability to make choices between right and wrong. And we want to know why kids go around shooting people? Okay. I was in a chiropractor's office as a result of this car accident. And, I've been wanting to ask this question for quite some time. I heard many years ago it was like 1 out of 10 and then maybe 1 out of 4. How many people are on medications today? Now, in a chiropractor's office, most people that go there are more healthy bound, not into drugs, medications kind of things. So I asked the doctors there, I said, can you tell me approximately what the percentage is of the people that come into your office that are my age, 30 and under? Okay, pushing 60. Okay, how many of them are medications? And she looked at me. I expected a pretty, 50% maybe. I'm at a chiropractor's office. She told me less than 1%. Yes, not on medication. I looked at my son who was getting x-rays. I said, what about him and his age? She goes, probably at least 50% are on meds. So back to the title of this is how many people are not really dealing with reality? Because we have drugs for everything. We have drugs so you won't feel pain when you're giving birth and you're missing out on all kinds of things. Your baby's going to suffer. We've even linked it to juvenile diabetes later on in life. I mean, there's all these things. Research this stuff. Just don't take my word for it. Look at the good, the pros, the cons for the mom and the baby, for natural childbirth and nursing. Then compare that to what it's like to get the word straight from the breast of Elohim. Okay? So, let's see what the next slide is. You can take it to the next slide, because now I'm gonna read this so I don't get off track. Zach was a very, very difficult birth. It was a home birth. And when I describe this birth, I'm going to read this part, but not the birth part. Understand and think about Israel. Think about God's people. Okay, everything was lined up. No reason that child shouldn't have been born by noon, except that his daddy needed to come home from lunch. I was dilated. Everything was ready. There was no reason, no physical reason why he should not have been born by noon. Started contracting about 9 in the morning when I first woke up. Now he's like I have 7 children. He would be my 6th birth. Okay, so there's a lot of things that were lined up just right. He should have been here. But, like Israel, trying to take the back way out, whenever I had a contraction, my uterus would not line up at the birth canal. So I was trying to go out the spine. I had a masterful midwife. If we did not trust her, if we did not trust Elohim, because you got to understand, where I come from and all the nightmares that I've been through with medical doctors, I feel more safe in the middle of the desert with no one but Elohim in childbirth or anything. Okay? That's the kind of faith it takes sometimes for him to show up. Because he's, why bother showing up for my children? They think they can do everything themselves. So anyway, he was turned the wrong way, which of course was the problem with my very first birth. And to go back to that, when she was born, her nose was like this. And still to this day, if you look really close, the nose is. But the thing that Father showed me about her was she did turn. Okay? She did. It was just horrid. And Zach turned. But the nurse had to literally hold my uterus in place for that baby to be born. Now, one of the things Father showed me from that birth was, and that was the other thing, because of what I was going through with some other trials with my other children and their father, not that gentleman back there, I was going through a lot of Lamentations. So I spent all my time in Lamentations, Psalms, and the book of Jeremiah and Isaiah. And during that time, Father was talking to me about my children, which are really his children, they're really not mine, are the remnant. I've been accused of being Seventh-day Adventist. I don't even know what their teaching is about the remnant, but I can guarantee you I did not get it from them. Okay, I got it from the spoken word from Elohim to me that my children were part of the remnant of Israel. I didn't understand it then, but I understood what I was raising. Okay, so one of the things Father showed me, and if I had a sound clip, I would just love to play it right now. Who's heard the song, I Can Hear the Rhythm of the Beat of the Tribe of Judah by Misty Edwards? Have you not heard that song? YouTube it. It's like 5 to 10 minutes, isn't it? And it's kind of annoying if you don't like that kind of music, okay? But if I was a video director, I'd love to direct that video if there was a real video for it, you know? Because when you listen to that song, it's just beating and beating and beating. You've got to listen to this song. I'm just telling you. Okay? You can imagine that the Lion of Judah, this lion like in a pit at a rodeo, you know, right before they let him out, he's just tramping back and forth, and he's watching everything that's going down on the face of the earth, and he wants to get out. And he wants to tear the people up that are messing with his people. Well, Father showed me that that's the way that birth was. It doesn't matter what you say or what you do or what the governments of the face of the earth do. The kingdom of heaven will not be rebirthed, and the exodus and the restoration will not happen until he speaks it and says so. Even though everything's ready. And if you've ever been in a birth like that, you'll remember that, okay? He comes when he's ready. Now, interestingly, he came at 7 o'clock at 7 pounds. Imagine that. Next thing. Go back a couple, please. So I think we're about 3 days, and I'm just going to read this, go about 3 days after his birth, okay? The reason he's named Zechariah is because Yahweh remembered and gave Daryl and I a son, then another son overflowing back there. After I gave up and had settled for, whatever, I gave up praying for children after 2 bouts of 10 years of barrenness. So, but Yahweh remembered. He remembered our prayers after we thought he gave up on us. When Zechariah was about 3 days old, I was having trouble nursing him. He was crying because he was hungry and he wouldn't latch on correctly, which caused my breast to become painfully engorged. As I was extremely tired, crying and thinking that I was starving my baby to death, I longed to hold him and feed him and nourish him. But there was nothing I could do correctly. And of course, it was his fault because he couldn't latch on. No. Which is actually harder when they're engorged. Remember that. If you've been away from the Word too long, it's going to be a little hard for you to latch on. And when it does, and then this is what the Ruach said to me. He said, daily, I too long to hold my children close to my breast, look into their eyes and feed them with my true milk that will nourish and strengthen them. This is my word. But they would rather have artificial milk from a propped up bottle from which they don't have to work at sucking from in order to develop their muscles. They are gluttons for artificial milk, an artificial word gained easily. This is why they choke, and the milk runs down the sides of their heads into their ears, and they get ear infections, and they can't hear me. They do not want to gaze back into my eyes as I hold them in my arms and gaze back upon them and wonder of how beautiful and perfectly I created them. They do their own thing in their own way. They don't want to latch onto me correctly and work at getting more pure milk that will nourish and heal them and make them strong. Of course, this broke my heart, and I realized that I was just as guilty when I did not daily suck from his breast, the El Shaddai, the many-breasted one, who had more than enough to provide all of our needs. So, what type of milk are you drinking? Here's some analogies Father kind of showed me after this. You know, today's society, I would say, as a whole, gives them a milk bottle. And that particular first milk bottle really isn't true to the nipple. You'll see the shorter latex ones are more like the nipple, the shorter, rounder. And they're getting artificial milk, and it runs out easy, and they have all kinds of health issues. I even had a doctor who used to call me in, and she couldn't legally tell the patients what to do with their children, but she would call me in and she'd say, please tell these moms what to do. I've already given them meds, I've already done this. Their kids keep getting earaches and stuff, okay? It's because of the formulas and propping up the bottles and all kinds of different things. So that's probably what most people get. They get artificial milk, and they get it in a bottle that can cause issues. Then you have some people who actually express the milk, or a combination of nursing. So they express it with a pump, and there is an old-fashioned way also to express it. It's not easy. That's why you need a mom to come along and show you. I know it's embarrassing. It might be humiliating. But let me tell you, when we get out there in the wilderness, there aren't going to be any breast pumps. I'm just saying. And then what happens, and you can't really see it well here, but on the right, there's a little plastic bag in that bottle. Now, I could not find a picture of the way the plastic bags used to be. They really, truly were just plastic bags that you took and you kind of spread over. But today, they're actually, on the right, you can see it's a plastic bag, but they built in the rim. So you don't have to pull that rim over. Now, the problem I see with that is if you do have to express your milk, for whatever reason, it doesn't just fold up like a simple plastic bag that you can just store in the freezer, because you can store breast milk in the freezer and use it for later. It's the best thing you can do for a preemie or any baby who's not getting regular milk. So they've changed that a little bit. And so you can get a bottle with real nourishment. But what you're missing, usually, not always, because what happens is moms get busy, families get busy, and once you start that bottle, you kind of stop this. You're looking for a way to prop it. So, you know, are you propping your relationship with the Father in your bottle, in your nursing? Are you drinking artificial milk? Go to the next slide. So you could be getting not a no zilch, right? You're gonna die anyway. You could be getting the artificial milk, artificial bottle. If for whatever reason you don't have milk, or you're taking care of someone else, and we did this with our adopted son. I had tried to nurse him. It had been a couple of years since I had a child, and I thought maybe I could, but I literally could not spend the hours all day and have the other children in the house. Because the first year Daryl and I were married, we had 9 children come to live with us. We basically had a children's home. And we took in all the children from the families that people didn't want to deal with and the church didn't want to deal with. So what we did is we got a goat, and we got raw goat's milk. Because if you got to nurse or feed a baby, the closest thing to a mother's natural milk is goat's milk. Okay? So in that case, you know, now there are, you can just put it in a bottle. And what I did for a short while that you can do is they actually have this bottle tubing system where you put your tubes and you kind of like tape them on the breast, and then the baby is nursing from the breast, but they're nursing the goat's milk or whatever. So there's other things that go with that and that bonding. And let me back up for just a minute. Because Jed was a preemie, we were cautious. We still had him at home. We had a water birth, which that's a whole nother analogy you can do with the Holy Spirit and water. It eases the pain. It helps manage the pain in the birth. But Jed, we as a safety precaution, because in Florida, they take your kids for all kinds of reasons. We could lose all our children. They could say, oh, you shouldn't have had a kid at home, blah, 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 whatever. I read a private school for home educators, so I'd seen a lot of kids taken for a lot of stupid reasons. And So anyway, Jen ended up in the, we let him, we went to the hospital as a precaution because he had what they call wet lungs. And when I had an eye infection when he was born, my eye was like jelly. And I really couldn't see him very well. And they didn't want to let me into the nursery. I had a wonderful doctor that, if it wasn't for her, I don't think Jen would be here. Her husband was a pharmacist and a naturopath, go figure. But I called her from the home and I said, we're going to send him there because we don't want to take chances of losing our children. We learned later that we should have never done that. I think we should have walked in more faith because it caused a lot of other issues. But they took him there. And I said, please, when you admit him and you sign the orders for him, don't let him vaccinate him. She said, okay. And so I was not their favorite person on their list. I come in several hours later because I'm waiting for the placenta to pass, and my husband went ahead with the baby. And I come in. I didn't have the baby in the hospital, so I don't get a place to be. They made me sit in the hallway. I sat there for, a week or two? I never left that hospital. And miraculously, my bleeding was less than a regular menses. I believe it was because of the nutrition I was doing. But I was determined I would not leave that child. Well, what happened was the nurses were very angry. They made up this thing that I could not come in the nursery because of my eye. So whenever, the last time I was in the nursery, I'm looking at him and he's failing. And I heard the Spirit tell me he's dying. And there's a lot more to that because Father warned me before and after that, before he was even born. But I'm like, he's dying because I can't hold him. So if you don't think bonding's not important, touching, spending time in relationship with your loved ones and your Elohim, you are mistaken. Within hours, they called the doctor because they were going to fly him up to Shands because his stats were so low. Praise God for Dr. Mena. She walked in, she looked at Jed, she looked at me, she stood there like this. All the nurses are waiting. She goes, pick him up. So I picked him up. All his stats went straight up. Breathing, heartbeat, everything. Dr. Maida says, how often are you coming in here? I said, well, I wanted to come every 2 hours, but they stopped me. She turned around, she wrote an order. You will let this woman in every 2 hours. We were out of there the next day with a healthy baby, but as a precaution, we hooked him up to a monitor. For 3 months, that monitor went off all day long because Jed could not breathe or have a bowel movement or suck without it overloading his system because his neurons weren't developed enough. So when you get to the picture about the dropper, okay, it overloaded his system. So what I had to do constantly was massage him just to get his heart going because he would just start failing. So what I did was I took the dropper and I dropped just a few drops. And you might be like that. You might not be able to handle any of Elohim's word but a drop at a time. But don't give up because that is what will heal you and bring nourishment to you. I did not give up pumping for 3 months. And I don't know, I can't tell you how I did it. It had to only be that I was determined to do what was best, and Elohim was with me, because I am not exaggerating when I tell you I never went more than 2 hours of sleep a day, and with that total 2 hours, it was never more than 30 minutes total. It was because of Elohim's presence, and because we were depending on him. And then one day, 3 months later, I'm driving down the road, taking him somewhere, I don't know where, and this kid who can't hardly breathe or do anything, never cried, didn't have enough energy. He started screaming. And he did not stop all day. Like he just woke up from the world, realized he was there, and he was mad. And from there on out, he went right to nursing. And at 3 months, 6 months, he looked like a 1 week old baby. But by the time he was 9 months, he was a roly-poly baby. Okay, go ahead to the next one. So that's what the word can do for you, is my point. How am I doing on time? Probably not good. So yeah, I can't read that. 50 minutes? Hallelujah. Okay. Don't prop your baby or yourself. Okay? You're going to get infections. Not only that, if you're getting artificial milk, you're going to be distorted in what you think and believe. Because you don't have Elohim with the pure word looking at you going, yeah, baby. And then when you go to bite him, flicks you on the head and goes, no, we don't do it that way. Okay? Let's go to Can a Mother Forget? Isaiah 49:15. Can a mother forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee. Now, I put that oxytocin as a note because one of the things that happen, like I said, is you get this oxytocin, which is this love hormone for your baby. This is what I think enables mothers to stay up and do what they need to do. But I'll share this and then go on. And you can forget your baby even if you're nursing. I confess. In Florida, it's so hot and humid. And I went to the grocery store. I had Zach in the back seat. And I drove up to the garage, and I was unloading the groceries. You know, I was going to go get them later after I got the groceries. I forgot to. I don't know. I was putting away groceries. I'm sure it was a lack of sleep, okay? But all of a sudden, my milk let down. And I'm like, I forgot my baby. Now, praise God, he was outside. The air conditioner was running. Okay, I've also locked him in that way, the other child. But anyway, a mother can temporarily forget it, but physically she can't. Sooner or later, her milk's going to come in and she's going to go, So don't we think that Elohim will remember his children? The next slide. Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. Next one. The children which thou shalt have after thou hast lost the other shall say again in thine ears, the place is too strait for me. Give place to me that I may dwell. Now this word too strait is like the birth canal. It's narrow. There's not a lot of room. My husband who was there can tell you there's not a lot of room. I take that back. I have assisted a few births, but I just never experienced it like he did. He told me, and I can tell you all, if it was up to men, none of us would be here. Okay, it's not happened. Next slide. Then shalt thou say in thine heart, who hath begotten me these, seeing I have lost my children and I am desolate, a captive and removing to and fro, and who hath brought up these? Behold, I was left alone. These, where had they been? This is talking about the children of Israel and how they've lost them, and the whole thing about how Yahweh's going to remember his children and bring him back. So go to the next one that says, Thus saith Elohim Yahweh, behold, I will lift up mine hand to the Goy, the foreign nations, and set up my standard to the people, and they shall bring your sons in their arms, and your daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders. For a lot of us, my age especially, we have children who are not walking the walk. They're lost. A lot of them know the truth. There's a lot out there who don't know the truth at all. When Father can reach them, he will. But we have a lot of children that are walking out there and know the truth, and they feel like God was shoved down their throats. You know, I can't get my oldest daughter to understand that I walked on that other side. I know what it cost. She doesn't understand that everything I am or I've done, that she says will always turn into God, is because I got no other choice. Okay? There's no other choice for me but to go back. And I don't want to go back. Okay? And for a lot of years, I don't know if this will help anyone, I feel like I'm supposed to tell this because this wasn't in here. A lot of years, I really condemned myself over and over. Everything in her life, whatever was wrong, is my fault. But finally, I woke up one day and I realized Adam and Eve had perfect parents in the garden. Guess what happened? Okay? They rebelled. So, my daughters, when they tell me, well, everything, if I came to you, you would turn it to God. Well, you know what? Here's the deal. I finally shook off the condemnation and said, I fed you, I clothed you, I loved you, I wanted you. I was not whoring, I was not drinking. If you don't like it, take it up with the Father. I'm over it. All I can do now for you is pray. That's all I can do. And you know more at 8, 9, 10 than I did at 30. Because you had that milk all along. I didn't. Now let's contrast this. He says, I'm not going to forget my children. Well, look what he tells us here in Hosea. Now they're kicked out, remember, because of, in Hosea, I think it's 4:2. They're kicked out because they're swearing, lying, killing, stealing, adultery, etc. for blood. And then he says, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of Elohim, I will forget your children. Now, 30 years ago, in the Christian church, I was taught that God loves all children, and everybody, all children are saved, and maybe that's still true. But when I read that verse, I was like, whoa. You see, even though I want a relationship with Father, if things got hard, I might go back to sinning. But one thing I didn't want was my children to be forgotten. Those were my anchors to keep my life straight when I couldn't. Okay? And then there's a promise that goes on. It says, and the king shall be thy nursing fathers, and their queens thy nursing mothers. And that word nursing, it has to do with nourishing. Okay? And they shall bow down to thee with their face toward the earth and lick the dust of your feet. Now, I don't know about you. I don't really want anybody to do that for me. I don't want people bowing to me. But if you're children of the king, and you've been tortured and gone through a lot of things that our brothers and sisters around the world do, or if you've ever had anyone in your life who's so humiliated you and so brought you down, you might for one moment like that. If only for the reason to know that Elohim saw your suffering and he acknowledges it and affirms it, and that he loves you and that he cares about you and that it's all under control for him. And when this happens, you shall know that I am Elohim, or Yahweh, for they shall not be ashamed that wait for me. So here's, again, this: if you're on the right side of the word, getting the pure milk, these are the results. But thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. For I will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save your children. And I can't read the notes. I had notes down there, but they don't show up. We have in Matthew and Luke. Next slide. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered your children together, even as a hen gathered her chickens under her wings, and you would not. Now we know that hens don't nurse their young. But it's that idea of that fluttering, and we see that in Genesis 1:1, 1:2, right? He's got his word, it's going out, the pure mouth of the word, and it's fluttering. And so we have here another thing. We have that thing about that debar, that fluttering, the frequency of his word, that he wants to cover his people. And so the next one says, can a mother forget? And I assured you that she can. So the question is, if you're not getting the natural milk of the word, how much more will you forget? How much more will you be missing? Now, the next one, let's talk about, again, a little bit more. We have been removed from reality. How does this affect us now in our trials, our tribulations, and birthing process, and the things that we go through? Number one, we don't have an agricultural lifestyle for the most of us. You know, daddies go off to work, families and children don't get as a whole to be with their mom and dads during the day. So they lose out on so many things in life, things they just don't know how to do or relate. And if if you've never had goats or a bull, you don't really get what a butt head is and a bullhead. Okay? I want to tell you a story about Marshmallow. I'm not sure it's going to be as funny and hilarious and mortifying as it was, because I can't reenact the whole thing for decency's sake. But I can let you use your imagination. When Daryl and I first got married, we had all these children. We had 7 acres, and we were getting all these animals and everything. And we decided we wanted to add a beef to the farm. You know, so we had another homeschool family. They had 9 adopted children, and they had this little runt of it's not a cow, it's really a bull. And I said, okay, sure, we'll take him. Well, I'd only really seen him good once the day he came. And we were going to, get him fat and butcher him. Well, the next day he was gone. He was kind of small, so he could get through the horse fence, even though it was fenced for horses and everything. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, it was a dead end to get to our house. You weren't coming to our house unless you were really coming there. But it was within maybe a half a mile to the highway. So I was a little nervous because I didn't want to go to jail because he got out and hit a car on the highway, So I called animal control. It's just so happened the lady that answered the phone happened to live way across the swamp field from us. You couldn't see it, but she told me where she was. She goes, oh, he came to our house. We got a lot of cows. She says, I'll have my husband call you. And so he calls me and he says, well, you want me to bring him around to you? And I'm like, well, that's great because we don't have a horse trailer, He goes, well, he's going to keep trying to run out if you don't castrate him. And I said, well, okay. Now, up to this point, the only castration we had done was those little bands on the goats, And I thought that he would come down the driveway with the trailer, take the bull out to the barn, tie him up, do a little surgery, maybe give him some painkillers. I wasn't very smart about it those days. Yeah, that's not what happened. So I'm looking out behind the field and I'm going, oh my gosh, there's another straggly cow or bull or whatever. And I didn't recognize it was mine because it had been through the brush so bad. And I look back over there and there's this guy walking through the field. It happens to be him. He was trying to run him to me. Well, he got him to the fence. We pulled him through the fence, and then I put a rope around him. And so I was holding him. He says, I'll be back around, because he's got to go way back to his house, back up around the highway and back. So next thing I know, so I'm holding this poor, straggly-looking bull. He comes down the drive. He's on a four-wheeler. Now, I never saw a cowboy on a four-wheeler, okay? He comes down. He gets off the four-wheeler, and if you could just imagine what men might have to do to adjust themselves. And I've got girls. I've got all girls with me, okay? We got a girls' home. I had no clue what he was going to do. So after he adjusted himself, and I'm in shock over the four-wheeler and what he's doing in my yard, I'm telling you, it was not a minute, not 30 seconds. He went over, he took that bull, he went, phew, down, cut, throw, cut, throw. And I'm like, and the little girls are going, I doing this, Mom? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I think I was literally in shock. And then he got up, he readjusted himself, he got back on the four-wheeler and left. And here was this poor bull standing there. He was like, I'm not going to put anything on it. He's bleeding. And I'm trying to get the bull to move. I found out what a bullhead was, okay? And he lived. And he got fat. And we butchered him. But he had a bad day that day. The point about that is, though, that's a reality I never had. Okay? So just imagine what you're missing. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about money. You know, money represents, go back please. Money represents energy. Energy. Because we don't, you know, if you had to take your sacrifice up to the temple, and especially if it was because you sinned and you did something wrong, you know, you needed a little bit, you would know what it cost. Now, you'd be taking meat and food from your family, right? Because they didn't eat meat all the time. So all that time, all that energy, all that love, all that care, it'd be probably like kind of losing a car today, okay? And, you know, when someone gives you something, I don't know, I was guilty of it. When someone makes something for you, unless you understand the value in that, it doesn't mean a lot. But when I started messing with linen and wool, we started raising our own sheep. You take care of that sheep, you feed them, you shear them. You have to be like a world-class athlete to do that. It is tough. Okay? Jacob was a tough guy. And if you've ever watched these people shear these sheep in 3 minutes or less, even the women, they got muscles from head to toe. Okay? I just couldn't understand why 100% wool cost so much. I kept trying to figure out a way to make it cheaper. But it didn't matter which part of the process I skipped or didn't. There's so much energy and money accounted for shearing, raising it, carding it, cleaning it, spinning it. And if you've never put the seed in the ground, watered it, taken care of it, harvested it, and put it up and canned. I remember one year we did that. I was so tired, dead beat, from canning a garden we had that year. And somebody sent me a request for, I know I'm stepping on toes. What's that game called? Farmville, thank you. And I'm like, who would want to pretend? Who's got time? I mean, if you really did it, you'd have something and you'd have this pleasure in it and you'd have good nutrition better than if you didn't. And who's got time to play it? I'm just saying. Okay, it's just not good timing for me. Okay. So you know, when you go to purchase something, and especially if you have a husband who provides for you, or even if you provide it yourself or your mom or your dad or whoever, stop and think about the character, the dedication, the time, the tenacity, the faithfulness it took for that person to provide that for you. Because all we've done, instead of bartering and sharing and trading our skills, our time, our energy, and our gifts, we made it and cheapened it with dollar bills. So we don't see the value in it, okay? And we don't understand how that impacts our lives and how we act and how we behave towards one another. Because we're just in a throwaway society. It didn't cost anything to get. It doesn't cost anything to throw it away. And yet it costs us everything. Okay? We talked a little bit about this. If my mother had had her way, she'd never been to a real birth. She would have sent me to the hospital. I would have had a C-section with Zach. Okay? There's a lot of things. If you haven't done it, especially you young women, and even those who have, I know a lot of women who've gone back afterwards when they realize that they were robbed of some things, that when they have their next child, or if you haven't had your first child, research it. Find out what the repercussions are of those artificial things that happen. You know, it saddens and breaks my heart when I meet a woman who's a believer, and the first thing she comes out of her mouth is she's got drugs to deal with a day, she's got drugs to give to her kids to handle them, and she doesn't think twice about taking a drug to give birth to one. She does not understand, but she is a product of our public education system. Okay? I was too. And on top of being an Air Force brat. Okay? So, Father can open your eyes, but you've got to be willing to go that place with him. The other thing about nursing I learned, I was sabotaged with the first one. And I thought, because of the way I was raised, I returned to work 9 days after my baby girl was born. I thought that was the thing to do. I thought that was better than standing in line with social services. I thought I was tough and I was proud. It cost me everything. Because if you're not there, and I'm not saying there aren't exceptions or times that you got to do, but I'm telling you what looks like exceptions sometimes really aren't, if you'll just be determined to say, God, you've got to deliver me through this. Because what happens is that child doesn't learn whether she can express it or not. She didn't learn to trust me. And I thought that because she had withdrawal issues when I went to work, she needed to go to daycare and she needed to go to dancing classes at 2 and 3 years old. What an idiot I was. That just made it worse. She didn't want to be around. Then she got kicked out of a daycare at 2 years old. Okay? One thing you want about my oldest daughter is you want her on your side. You don't ever want to be on the opposite side. It really does affect your relationship with your children. Thank you. So the thing is you have the pain now or you have it forever. The same thing with nursing. Once you get past what you think is impossible to feed that child, once you get past whatever you think is impossible for Yahweh to deliver you from, you're free. You can get up and run and go wherever you want. You don't need bottles. You don't need a diaper bag. You just go. You go anywhere, and it's free. All you got to do is find water for mama, food, okay? And you get those love hormones. How many minutes? What? Oh. Whoa. You didn't give me any warning there. All right. Well, we'll skip through I have all these verses about the birth pains for men and the trials. I mean, they're all through the scriptures, guys. You need to, when I was having Crystal, I had back labor 13 and a half hours, and they say you're going to go through transition, it's going to get worse. Well, I knew in the first 2 hours, if it's going to get worse, I was in big trouble. They didn't bother to tell me, oh, you're exception to the rule, of course. And the whole time it was always the same. So there was never no worse. It was worse the whole time. And I remember all those Baptist preachings growing up of hell is eternal torture. And I knew that if this was anything like it, I did not want it. So whatever I didn't have right, I wanted to make sure I got right. So I'm on overtime, huh? Okay, so if you're in the wilderness, you're going through a divorce, you're going through children, family, members that are having problems, you're going through sickness, embrace it. Yeshua embraced the execution cross. Even if you don't believe in Yeshua, the moment that you sacrifice praise to him and the will in your life, I believe he says he's with you and he's with those of contrite and humbleness. He shows up on the scene. It might not deliver you right away, but the pain gets easier to bear. And it's like a duck. You can feel it on the back, but it doesn't hurt. It just rolls off. So what I want to say to you is, go to give thanks. And then we'll wrap it up here. Give him thanks for every trial and every contraction, because he's strengthening you and making it possible for you, whether it's to be delivered out of the birth canal or to nourish you, to bring you up to what he's got for you to live in life. Whatever it is, praise him, even if it's to the death. There's a resurrection, and either you believe that or you don't, and you live that way according to it or you don't. Because if you don't, you might as well just hang it out and quit playing. Okay? There was a little story, and I know I can't tell you right quite the way it's supposed to be. It's very quick. But there's a story about this man who God told him to push this huge stone up this hill. And I think the story goes like 30 years later, he's still pushing the stone and it hasn't moved. And he's complaining to the Lord, and the Lord basically says, look at your muscles. Look at how strong you are. I never told you to move it. I told you to push it. And that's where you might be. So, for every contraction and for tribulation that he is preparing for you, get real and embrace it. And die to live, because that is where you gain life. I'll be done. Thank you.